Tyranids are an all-consuming alien swarm. Driven by the vast and ineffable intellect of the hive mind, their tendrils drive deeper into the galaxy with every passing hour. In this video, we'll be showing you how to batch paint your Combat Patrol box in the colours of Hive Fleet Leviathan in order to get them on the gaming board in no time at all. We'll show you how to plan your paint scheme so that you can batch paint your models in an efficient and time-saving manner. All the paints you'll need for this guide are on the screen now. Remember that these are our suggestions and that you can paint your miniatures however you like. Also on screen now is any additional equipment we've used. This includes brushes and mediums. However, please use whatever brushes you're most comfortable with, and if you don't have any mediums at home, you can always use water instead. As you can see here, we've already built the entire box and undercoated it with Wraithbone spray. This is a great starting point for us, as the Wraithbone spray is a light but warm undercoat that will fit perfectly with the natural tones that we want from our Tyranid skin. Because we will predominantly be using contrast paints here, it's worth having a pot of Wraithbone to hand in case we need to tidy up any mistakes that we've made during our process. We're going to start painting our Termagants first. Scuttling predators that attack in huge numbers, Termagants harry their prey with a hail of firepower before overwhelming and tearing them apart with their vast swarms. We've got our 5 Termagants all on individual painting handles to make it faster and easier to move from one to the other. We're choosing to do them in batches of 5 because this is a manageable amount for us. You can do fewer or more in your batches, it's whatever works best for yourself. So the first thing we need to do is get a few large dollops of contrast medium on our palette. We're looking to do a 3:1 ratio of contrast medium to Magos purple. For this stage, we'll be using a medium shade brush. We don't have to worry about being neat at this point because any overspill will be painted over with darker colours later on. Once the first model is done, we'll move on to the next one in our batch. The beauty of this method is, when the 5th model is painted, our first should be dry and ready to move on to the next step. A nice little tip here when applying thin contrast paint and you've noticed that it's a bit too heavy in places is to clean off your brush and while it's still a little wet, gently wipe it across the paint, collecting the excess as well as thinning it across the surface areas. Right, with that first stage done, we're on our way to batch painting our Tyranid Combat Patrol box. We're now going to go back to our first model and start the next stage. For this, we'll be using Doomfire Magenta mixed with contrast medium and applied over the fleshy innards and bioweapons. We're looking to do a 3:1 ratio of contrast medium to Doomfire Magenta. We can afford to be a bit messy here when applying it over the bioweapons, as we want the colours to mix naturally with the skin, but try not to let it go too much, as we don't want to lose that tinted skin colour. When doing the fleshy innards, take a little bit more time and try to keep your paint concentrated over the area where you want it. Now that the bioweapons and fleshy innards are done, we're ready to move on to paint the carapace. For this, we'll be using the aptly named Leviathan Purple. We're going to use a small base brush and take Leviathan Purple straight from the pot and apply it over the carapace. In order to control our application, we'll get a few dollops onto our palette and go from there. This just gives us more control as well as reduces the chance of knocking over our paint. Take your time doing this, as Leviathan Purple is a very pigmented paint, and if we get it on the fleshy bits, we'll need to tidy up. It's worth it to be slower and neat here, as the time spent tidying up will be longer than the time spent taking extra care at this stage. However, if you do make a mistake, don't worry. Just go back over with the previous stages. With that stage complete, our batch of Termagants are now really starting to come together nicely. We would normally do the basing stage at the end, but we're going to do it now. This is a great tip from our army painters, because psychologically it will feel like the majority of the mini is complete and there's just a few more details left to do. For basing this batch, we'll be using Astrogranite debris and spreading it all over the base with our medium texture tool. Just make your way through the batch, applying the texture paint carefully around the model. The beauty about doing this now is that while the texture paint dries, we can finish doing the rest of the model. If you need any more advice on basing, remember to check out the Painting Essentials basing video. With Astrogranite debris applied on this batch, we'll now need to do the final bits while it dries. We're now going to pick out all the talons, hooves and teeth with Black Templar straight from the pot. We'll be using a medium layer brush for this, as we want to be fairly neat with this process as well. Again, get a few dollops onto your palette in order to control the amount of paint we'll have on our brush with this process. Black Templar is a darker, more concentrated contrast paint, so it will stain any overspilled area, so we want to avoid this as much as possible. With the black details picked out, we're nearly finished with this first batch. It's time to add some depth to our Termagants, and for this we'll be using Caribou Crimson. We're going to be applying this all over the carapace in order to get that slight red tint, and then around the tail, hooves and the ends of the bioweapon limbs. Once we've applied Caribou Crimson to our selected areas, go back and make sure there is no pooling anywhere. Dry off your brush and soak it up with the bristles. A good tip here as well is that we can get a little bit of water onto our brush, and while our shade is still wet, just gently brush the shade over the area of the model, thinning it out and giving a slight gradient towards whatever area we want to be darker. Our Termagants are looking great, and now it's time to pick out the final details. All we need to do in this stage is use Wraithbone to pick out the teeth. We'll be using a small layer brush for this. If you want, you can also pick out the eyes as well. This is definitely an extra step, which is completely up to you if you want to do it. We'll show you an easy way to paint the eyes that takes advantage of painting them with Wraithbone. Remember to thin out your Wraithbone with a little bit of water in order to keep the paint nice and thin to avoid any lumpiness and obscuring your details. Your batch of Termagants are ready. Now, if you've chosen to do the eyes, we'll quickly show you how to add some colour to them. We're going to use Bad Moon Yellow and a small layer brush to add a bit of detail to our Termagants. Apply Bad Moon Yellow straight from the pot over the Wraithbone that we've painted on the eye. It will flow nicely off the raised details and into the recesses. Awesome! Your first batch painted group is ready, and all that's left to do is finish off the base. Now that the texture paint is dry, we'll apply Basilicanum Grey all over it. Make sure to also paint over all the other basing details that we can find. This will keep them neutral as well as tie them in with the rest of the Astrogranite debris. The very final step is to paint the rims of the bases in a colour that matches the rest of your army. In this instance, we've gone for Black Legion. Once you've finished your first batch, just repeat the exact same process for your next 3 batches of Termagants. And there we are! All our Termagants are painted and ready for battle. We'll now be focusing on the 5 Barbgaunts that are in the box. The Barbgaunts are little more than living weapons, their bodies and barb launchers slave to the will of the hive mind. The same basic principles will apply here as before. We'll be going through the entire process again, doing each paint on each model before moving on to the next in the scheme, allowing us to get the batch done efficiently. Our Barbgaunts are very similar to the Termagants, so we'll be using a lot of the same steps here. Same process as before, we'll be using a medium shade brush and applying 3 large dollops of contrast medium to our palette, and then adding Magos Purple to it. Now paint all over our Barbgaunt. Don't worry about being neat at this point. Once the first model is done, move on to the next. It's time to pick out the inner joints and fleshy bits. Again, it's Doomfire Magenta mixed with 3 dollops of contrast medium and applied with a medium layer brush. Just remember to take a little care with this process, as Doomfire Magenta is darker than Magos Purple, so we want to keep the paint in the areas where it's needed. If you overspill, just tidy back up with Wraithbone and then our Magos Purple and contrast medium mix. It's time to paint the carapace. Leviathan Purple straight from the pot using a small base brush. We can put a few dollops onto our palette as well. That makes it easy to control and less likely to knock the paint pot over. Take your time again with this step, especially when going near the fleshy areas. Alright, we're going to do the base now. Just like we did before, we'll use Astrogranite debris. We want all the bases to look the same so that the Combat Patrol will look awesome on the gaming table. It's time to use Black Templar again, and use it to paint the talons, hooves, teeth and barb launcher. Just like before, we'll be using a medium layer brush and applying Black Templar straight from the pot. When this stage is complete, we'll be more than halfway towards finishing this unit. For our first new paint to the scheme, we'll be using Sigvald Burgundy and applying it over the barb launcher skin. We're using a medium layer brush for this, making our way around the details, just picking out what we need to. And with that stage complete, there isn't much left to do on these Barbgaunts. We're now going to apply Caribou Crimson shade around the weapon's tail, carapace and hooves. Like before, we'll use a small base brush for this. Again, the reasoning for this step is that Caribou Crimson will add some depth to our unit as well as tie the carapace and fleshy details together. We need to remember that the Tyranids are organic, so making the separate areas connect with each other by using the same shade colour will help to achieve that organic living effect. Now all that's left to do is pick out the teeth and barb launcher details using Wraithbone and a small layer brush. Remember to just add a little bit of water to our paint in order to thin it out and allow for an easy flow onto the details. And our last step for the barb gaunts themselves is to pick out the barb launcher eyes and barb with Bad Moon Yellow. And with that complete, all that's left to do is apply a Basilicanum Grey all over the base. When that's dry, we'll then be picking out the rims with Black Legion. We're now going to move on to completing the Von Rhein's Leapers and the 2 Ripper Swarms. Stealthy hunters and expert ambushers, Von Rhein's Leapers are swift, agile and especially lethal in close quarters. We've added the 2 Ripper Swarms to this batch as it helps to make it up to 5 and just allows for an easy process. As before, we'll start off with getting the skin details complete. Don't worry about being neat here, as the other areas will be painted over with darker colours. Now, we're doing those inner fleshy bits with a 3:1 ratio of contrast medium to Doomfire Magenta. Using a medium layer brush, make your way around the model picking out those details. The Von Rhein's Leapers have these awesome talons, so we're going to pick out the fleshy bits under them to really make them stand out. We're now going to use Sigvald Burgundy. This will only be for the Von Rhein's Leapers, so don't worry about the Ripper Swarms. We're going to apply it over the tentacles that we can see coming out of the mouth. With the tentacles picked out, the menacing Von Rhein's Leapers are really starting to come to life. It's time to paint the carapace. This is our favourite part of the batch painting process because it is the step that really seems to make our Tyranids come alive. As before, we're using a Leviathan Purple straight from the pot and a small base brush to apply it all over the carapace. Just remember to take your time with this step, as Leviathan Purple is a very dark contrast paint. If you spill onto the other areas, just tidy back up with the previous colours. For the Von Rhein's Leapers, we won't be painting the upper areas of the large talons at this stage. Okay, we're starting to get through these Leapers and Rippers. It's time to apply Black Templar to the talons, hooves, teeth and bioweapons. We're also picking out the upper areas of the large talons on the Von Rhein's Leapers. As always, with darker contrast colours, just remember to be neat when working near the other painted details. It's time to paint this batch with Aster Granite Debris. Learning from the experience of doing the first batches, this time around we have painted Black Templar before the texture paint. This will allow the texture paint to dry on top of the hooves, thus making it look a bit more connected with the base. Batch painting isn't an exact science, and as you can see here, you may learn and refine your process as you go along. It's time to apply Carabo Crimson shade around the weapons, tail, carapace and hooves. Like before, we'll be using a small base brush for this. With this step complete, we're almost done with this batch. Now we're going to pick out the teeth and eyes with Wraithbone. Remember to thin out your paint with a bit of water. Also, don't feel like you have to do the eyes either, but if you do, the next stage will apply to you. Finally, if you've based the eyes with Wraithbone, we're going to now apply Bad Moon Yellow straight from the pot with a small layer brush over them. This will really make them pop out and look menacing. Okay, let's move on to the bases. You know the drill by now, slap Basilicanum Grey over the base and then paint your rims. And there we go, our Von Rhein's Leapers and Ripper Swarms are completed. With those in the bag, we're going to move on to our next model, the all-consuming Psychophage. Whoa, what an awesome looking model this is. Right, we're going to approach doing it in exactly the same way we've done with our previous models. It is a big looking monster with loads of detail, but we feel very confident in our batch painting method and recipe, so we think we can paint this glorious monstrosity in no time at all. As always, we'll start with Magos Purple thinned with Contrast Medium. Remember, it's a 3:1 ratio of Contrast Medium to Magos Purple. We're using a medium shade brush here still, and just going around the model in sections, painting the details in. A good tip here is by doing it in sections, we can control the flow of the paint nicely and make sure that we're happy with how it's sitting before moving on to the next large area. Don't let the size of the model intimidate you here. We've made our way through the combat patrol and are fully experienced with our process. Your model will look great with the rest of your army as it comes together. The next step is to do those inner fleshy bits with a 3:1 ratio of Contrast Medium to Doomfire Magenta with a medium layer brush. By now we're fairly confident with what these look like, but remember, we can always just check the box art to confirm. Yes, it's our favourite step, time to do the carapace. As before, we're using Leviathan Purple straight from the pot. We'll be using both a medium and small base brush to apply it all over the carapace. The medium one for the bigger areas and then the smaller one when we get nearer the other details. Just remember to take your time with this step, as Leviathan Purple is a very dark contrast paint. If you spill onto the other details, just tidy back up with the previous colours. Okay, it's time to apply Black Templar to the talons, hooves, teeth and bioweapons. We'll also be picking out those orifices along the abdomen. As always, with darker contrast colours, just remember to be neat when working near other details. With that stage complete, our psychophage is really starting to come together. Let's get Astrogranite debris over the base now. Same process as before, make sure to cover the base fully. We're now using Sigvald Burgundy in two ways. Firstly, we're going to thin it down with contrast medium to a 3:1 ratio and apply over the tentacles that we can see coming out of the mouth. We're going to do a simple and quick blend for the tentacles using a nice little hack. While the paint is still wet, we'll clean our brush and dip it straight into our pot of contrast medium and then apply it over the tentacles, brushing downwards towards the mouth. The medium will thin out the paint even more and collect it at the base of the tentacles. It thins out the paint and does a quick and easy blend for us. Once that has been completed, we now need to apply Sigvald Burgundy straight from the pot over the inner mouth area. Lastly, we just need to pick out the gory stump of the Space Marine's arm. It's time to apply Caribou Crimson shade around the weapons, tail, carapace and hooves. Like before, we'll use a small base brush for this. With this step complete, we're almost done with our psychophage. Time for a new paint. We'll be using Gryph-Charger Grey to paint the gas coming out of the top of the model. We're going to do a 3:1 ratio of contrast medium to Gryph-Charger Grey and apply it over the entire area. Then, when it's dry, we'll use Gryph-Charger Grey straight from the pot and apply it towards the lower area of the gas, where it meets the top of the psychophage. This is an easy and cool effect to add a little bit of detail to our big centerpiece model from the Tyranid Combat Patrol box. Almost there. We're now going to pick out the teeth and eyes with Wraithbone. Remember to thin out your paint with a bit of water. Also, don't feel like you have to do the eyes either, but if you do, the next stage will apply to you. Finally, if you've based the eyes with Wraithbone, we're going to now apply Bad Moon Yellow straight from the pot with a small layer brush over them. This will really make them pop out and look menacing. There is an arm of a, we suppose, fallen Space Marine that is about to get consumed for the hive mind. We need to pick this out, and what better colour to use than Macragge Blue to represent the Ultramarines? It's time to apply Basilicanum Grey. We'll recess shade the Ultramarine arm and then apply it all over the base as before. When the Basilicanum Grey is dry on the base, don't forget that final step of just picking out the rim. And there we are, this big, all-consuming weapon of intergalactic horror is completed. Now, it's time to paint our last model in the Combat Patrol, the Winged Tyranid Prime itself. Winged Tyranid Prime swoop down into the midst of the foe. They rend and tear until only corpses remain. We're going to do the exact same steps as before, so this should be really quick and easy now. As always, we're doing a 3:1 ratio of contrast medium to Magos Purple, and then using a medium shade brush to apply it all over the skin details. The next step is to do those inner fleshy bits with a 3:1 ratio of contrast medium to Doomfire Magenta with a medium layer brush. We'll also be picking out the inner bits of the wings with these colours. Just to add a bit more detail to our leader piece, we'll do a second and third layer towards the bottom of the wings to make it look like light is coming through the top. Once the wings are done, we'll then pick out the inner fleshy bits of the wing joints with pure Doomfire Magenta from the pot. This will be a lot darker than the other inner fleshy bits, but will help to break up the separate sections nicely so we can see what's going on. You know what time it is? It's carapace time! That means that we're getting super close to finishing our Winged Tyranid Prime and the whole Tyranid Combat Patrol box as well. While using a small base brush and Leviathan Purple from the pot, take a moment to marvel at your achievement. We now need to use Black Templar in order to pick out the hooves, talons and teeth. Let's get Astrogranite debris all over the base now. Same process as before, make sure to cover the base fully. It's time to apply Caribou Crimson shade around the weapon's tail, carapace and hooves. Like before, we'll use a small base brush for this. With this step complete, we're almost done with our wing Tyranid Prime. We're now going to pick out the teeth and eyes with Wraithbone. As always, just remember to thin out Wraithbone with a bit of water before applying it onto the model. Also, if you want to skip doing the eyes, feel free. If you've chosen to paint the eyes, then our last thing to do is to apply Bad Moon Yellow with a small layer brush over them. With that step complete, our winged Tyranid Prime is finished. All that's left to do is base it in the same way that we've done the rest of the army. Congratulations! Your Tyranid Combat Patrol box is painted in the colours of High Fleet Leviathan and ready to devour all enemies on the battlefield. You should be really proud of your achievement, and we hope this video has given you an insight on how to batch paint models and get them looking awesome and on the tabletop with very little effort. One of the biggest tips to take away from this process is time management and making sure that we're always painting or doing something that helps to push the process forward in order to get the models done as quickly as possible. Also, when possible, it's worth it to be neat with the darker colours, as this will help to save you time by not having to go back over and tidying up. For more tutorials, tips and tricks, you can head to your local Warhammer store where our amazing staff will be more than happy to help. Or you can go check out citadelcolor.com. Well, we hope you've enjoyed this video and we'll see you again soon. Bye bye!